I'm Madison Reynolds, 28, and 1 year ago my father looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Stop pretending to be successful." Those words cut deeper than any knife. After quitting my secure corporate job to launch a sustainable fashion line, my family watched me struggle with barely concealed satisfaction. Then came an unexpected local news interview that changed everything overnight. Sometimes the universe has perfect timing, showing those who doubt you most exactly what you're made of. If you're watching from somewhere where dreams are still possible, hit that like button and subscribe. As I unpack how my family's disbelief became the fuel for my biggest success, remember that sometimes those who doubt you the loudest are about to witness your greatest triumph. Looking back now, I can pinpoint the exact moment my journey began. It was a Tuesday morning in April, the kind where spring finally pushes winter aside for good. I was sitting in my grey cubicle at Lancaster Marketing Group, staring at a spreadsheet that represented everything I had come to despise about corporate America. 4 years of college for a marketing degree, and here I was, creating reports that would ultimately help sell more plastic products to people who didn't need them. My phone buzzed with an article about the environmental impact of fast fashion. I'd been following sustainable fashion trends for months, spending my evenings sketching designs and researching eco-friendly fabrics. That article was the final push I needed. I closed my laptop, walked straight into my manager's office, and quit on the spot. "You're making a mistake," she said, concern etched across her face. "You've got real potential here, Madison." "That's exactly why I need to leave," I replied, surprising myself with my conviction. "I need to use that potential for something I actually believe in." I called my boyfriend Kevin on the drive home. Unlike most people in my life, Kevin had always supported my creative dreams. "You actually did it?" he asked, excitement evident in his voice. "I'm so proud of you, Mads. This calls for a celebration." That night over Thai takeout and cheap champagne in our small apartment, I laid out my plans for sustainable threads, a clothing line using only organic and recycled materials. Kevin listened intently, occasionally asking thoughtful questions about production costs and marketing strategies. "I believe in you," he said, clinking his glass against mine. "You're going to make this work." My family's reaction was significantly less enthusiastic. My father Richard, a financial advisor who measured success in retirement contributions and insurance policies, couldn't hide his disappointment. "You had stability, benefits, a clear path forward," he said during our weekly family dinner. "And you threw it away for clothes." "It's not just clothes, Dad," I tried explaining. "It's about creating sustainable fashion that doesn't harm the planet. There's a real market for it." My mother Patricia, ever concerned with appearances, attempted to find a silver lining. "Well, I suppose if it doesn't work out, your old company might take you back." Everyone's allowed one youthful indiscretion. Even my brother Tyler, who had followed our father's path into the financial sector, felt the need to weigh in. "Just make sure you're giving yourself a timeline. Don't burn through your savings chasing some fantasy." Despite their concerns, I moved forward with determination. I converted our spare bedroom into a small studio, pinning designs to the walls and ordering sample fabrics from sustainable suppliers. When the first samples of my designs arrived, I spent hours examining every stitch, every seam, making notes for adjustments. The moment I held the finished prototype of my signature piece, a versatile, reversible jacket made from recycled plastic bottles and organic cotton, tears sprang to my eyes. This wasn't just clothing, it was proof that my vision could become reality. My first small batch of products went live on a simple website I had built myself. I posted about the launch on social media, and to my delight, orders started trickling in. Not many, but enough to validate that there was interest in what I was creating. Each sale notification brought a flutter of excitement and vindication. Someone in Seattle just ordered 2 shirts and a jacket. I exclaimed to Kevin one evening. "That's amazing," he said, hugging me tightly. "They're going to love them." The positive customer feedback bolstered my confidence. "This jacket is even more beautiful in person," one customer wrote. "Knowing it's sustainable makes it that much better." With growing optimism, I decided to try a pop-up shop at the local farmers market. I spent days preparing, carefully steaming each garment, and creating attractive displays with information about sustainability practices. The pop-up exceeded my modest expectations. I didn't sell everything, but enough people stopped by, expressed interest, and made purchases to cover my booth fee and materials with a small profit. Several customers gave me their email addresses for future notifications, and one boutique owner took my card, mentioning she might be interested in carrying some pieces. That evening, riding high on my small success, I called my parents to share the news. "That's nice, dear," my mother said, her tone suggesting it was cute I was playing store. "Tyler just got promoted to junior partner, by the way. We're taking him out to celebrate this weekend." I tried not to let her dismissal dampen my spirits. This was just the beginning, after all. With Kevin's support and the validation from my first customers, I felt I was on the right path, despite my family's reservations. As I fell asleep that night, surrounded by sketches for my next collection, I felt a sense of purpose I'd never experienced in my corporate job. I had no idea of the challenges that lay ahead, but in that moment, I was filled with hope and determination. I was going to make sustainable threads a success, and eventually, my family would see that I'd made the right choice after all. 3 months after launching Sustainable Threads, the initial excitement began to fade as reality set in. While I'd had some success with online sales and the farmers market, growth was much slower than I'd anticipated. I'd projected breaking even within 6 months, but at the current rate, that timeline seemed increasingly unrealistic. Each morning, I'd check my sales dashboard, hoping for a surge of orders that never materialized. The website traffic remained steady but low, and conversion rates weren't where they needed to be. I tried not to panic as I watched my savings dwindle alarmingly fast. Production costs for sustainable materials were significantly higher than I'd budgeted for, and the small batch manufacturing I was committed to didn't benefit from economies of scale. Each piece was eating into my already limited capital, and the margins were razor-thin. I began cutting personal expenses wherever possible. I cancelled my gym membership, stopped eating out, and started buying groceries from discount stores. Despite these measures, I found myself reluctantly putting business expenses on my credit card, watching the balance climb month after month. When Kevin asked if I wanted to join him and some friends for dinner and a concert, I had to decline. "I really can't afford it right now," I admitted. "Every dollar needs to go back into the business." "Madison, you can't work all the time," he said with a sigh. "You barely leave that room anymore. It's not healthy." "This is what it takes to build something," I replied, feeling defensive. "It's not forever. Just until things take off." His expression told me he wasn't convinced, but he didn't push further. It was the first time I noticed a subtle shift in his support, from enthusiastic cheerleader to concerned observer. The real wake-up call came during Sunday dinner at my parents' house. What had once been a pleasant family tradition now felt like walking into a performance review without preparation. "How's the little clothing project going?" my father asked as he carved the roast. "It's a business, Dad, not a project," I corrected him. "It's challenging, but moving forward. I'm working on expanding my online presence and looking into more wholesale opportunities." My brother Tyler snorted. "Is that why your Instagram still has under 500 followers?" Real businesses invest in marketing, Madison. I'm bootstrapping right now, I said, feeling heat rise to my face. Growth takes time when you're funding everything yourself. Maybe it's time to consider getting a real job again, my father suggested, his tone maddeningly reasonable. You could do this clothing thing as a hobby on the side. There's no shame in admitting something isn't working. It is working, I insisted. It's just growing slowly, because I'm committed to sustainability and ethical production. That means higher costs up front. My mother reached over and patted my hand in a way that made me feel like a child. We just don't want to see you waste your potential, sweetheart. Your college roommate Jessica just made manager at her accounting firm. With benefits and everything. I pushed food around my plate, appetite gone. I don't want to be an accountant, Mom. I want to build something meaningful that reflects my values. Values don't pay rent, my father said flatly. Later that week, another setback hit. A shipment of organic cotton I'd ordered arrived with noticeable defects, rendering it unusable for my standards. The supplier apologized but could only offer store credit, not a refund, which meant my already stretched budget was now tied up in materials I couldn't use. That night, Kevin found me at my desk, staring blankly at a spreadsheet of dwindling finances. Maybe you should consider what your dad said, he suggested carefully. Not giving up entirely, but scaling back. Getting a part-time job to supplement while you build this more slowly. I looked up at him, hurt and surprised. You too? I thought you believed in this. I do believe in you, he said, but I'm worried. You're not sleeping, you're stressed all the time, and honestly, Mads, we barely spend any time together anymore. This is consuming you. Building a business takes sacrifice, I said, repeating the mantra I'd been telling myself. If I don't give it everything, it doesn't stand a chance. Kevin sighed and left the room without another word, leaving me feeling more alone than ever. That night, after he'd gone to bed, I allowed myself to cry for the first time since launching the business. Huddled at my desk surrounded by fabric swatches and unpaid invoices, I questioned everything. Was I delusional? Had I thrown away a stable career for an impossible dream? Was everyone right about me? But as the tears subsided, I looked at the wall where I'd pinned customer feedback, real people who had purchased and loved my designs. This jacket makes me feel good about my fashion choices, one had written. Please keep creating sustainable options. I wiped my eyes and straightened my shoulders. The road was harder than I'd expected, but I still believed in what I was building. I would find a way to make it work, even if that meant proving everyone wrong, including the doubts creeping into my own mind. 6 months into my sustainable fashion venture, the situation had gone from concerning to critical. My business account balance hovered dangerously close to zero, and my personal savings had been completely depleted. The credit card debt I'd accumulated stood at $7,852, a number that flashed in my mind every time I closed my eyes at night. I sat at my desk, staring at the calendar where I'd marked the day's rent was due with an ominous red circle. It would be the second month in a row I'd be late. My landlord had been understanding the first time, but his patience was wearing thin. My phone rang, displaying the name of a boutique owner in Portland who had placed a substantial order, my largest wholesale opportunity yet. My heart raced as I answered. Madison, I'm sorry to do this, she began, and I immediately knew what was coming. We've had to make some budget cuts for the quarter, and I'm going to have to cancel our order. I struggled to keep my voice steady. I understand. Is there any possibility of a smaller order instead? I could offer a discount. Not right now, I'm afraid. Maybe next season if things improve. Your designs are beautiful, but they are higher price point than most of our inventory. After hanging up, I put my head in my hands. That order had represented nearly $2,000 in revenue, money I had already mentally allocated to fabric suppliers and manufacturing costs. The sound of the front door opening announced Kevin's arrival home from work. He found me still at my desk, surrounded by scattered designs and financial statements. "We need to talk," he said, his expression serious as he leaned against the doorframe. I knew what was coming before he said it. We'd been growing apart for weeks, his frustration with my single-minded focus on the business creating a wedge between us. "I can't do this anymore, Madison," Kevin said quietly. "I've tried to be supportive, but you're not the same person. Everything is about the business. We don't go out, we don't see friends, we don't even really talk anymore unless it's about sustainable threads. It's just a difficult period," I argued, though my voice lacked conviction. "Once things take off." "But what if they don't?" he interrupted. "It's been 6 months, and you're in worse shape now than when you started. At what point do you reevaluate?" "So you're giving up on me too?" I asked, hurt transforming quickly to anger. "I'm not giving up on you. I'm accepting that we want different things right now. You're all in on this business, and I respect your passion, but I can't be in a relationship that doesn't have room for anything else." 2 weeks later, I moved out of our shared apartment and into a tiny studio on the other side of town, the only place I could afford with my dwindling income. The space barely fit a bed, a small desk, and the racks of clothing that represented both my livelihood and the reason for my current situation. But the reduced rent would buy me a little more time to make the business work. The following Sunday, I arrived at my parents' house for dinner with dark circles under my eyes and a forced smile on my face. I hadn't told them about the breakup with Kevin or my move to the cheap apartment, but news traveled fast. "Kevin's mother mentioned you two split up," my mother said as we set the table. She said he was quite upset about it. "It was mutual," I lied, not wanting to reveal how much it had hurt. "We want different things." What he probably wanted was a girlfriend who wasn't obsessed with a failing business, my brother Tyler remarked as he entered the dining room, a smirk playing at his lips. "Tyler, that's enough," my father warned, though his tone lacked conviction. Dinner began in uncomfortable silence, but it wasn't long before the conversation turned to my business. "How are things going with your clothes?" my mother asked, her attempt at casual interest transparent. "It's been challenging," I admitted, deciding honesty might earn some sympathy. "I've had some setbacks, but I'm still getting orders and positive feedback." My father set down his fork with deliberate calm. "Madison, it's been 6 months. Your mother and I have been talking, and we're concerned. You've lost your relationship, you're clearly not sleeping well, and I suspect you're in financial trouble." "I'm making adjustments," I said defensively. "Every new business has growing pains." "This isn't growing pains," he countered. "This is delusion. You're drowning in debt for a business that's going nowhere." "You don't know that," I insisted, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "You've never even looked at my business plan or my designs." "I don't need to see them to know that you're on a path to bankruptcy," he replied. "Stop pretending to be successful. You're not. You're failing, and the sooner you accept that, the sooner you can get your life back on track." His words hit like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. The worst part was that in my darkest moments, I'd had the same thoughts myself. "Richard," my mother interjected, "that's a bit harsh." "She needs to hear it," my father insisted. "I'm watching my daughter throw her life away for some fantasy about sustainable clothes that nobody wants to buy." "People are buying them," I said, but my voice had lost its confidence. "Not enough to pay your bills," my brother added. "My friend Marcus runs a startup incubator. He says most new businesses fail because the founders won't admit when their idea isn't viable. They keep throwing good money after bad until there's nothing left. Maybe you need to talk to someone professional, my mother suggested gently. Sometimes these entrepreneurial fixations can be a sign of deeper issues. I stared at my family in disbelief. They weren't just doubting my business. They were questioning my mental health. I'm not delusional, I said, pushing back from the table. I believe in what I'm creating, even if none of you do. I left without finishing dinner, tears streaming down my face as I drove back to my tiny studio apartment. That night, as I sat among the physical manifestations of my dream, the carefully designed clothes that represented everything I believed in, I received an email that offered the smallest glimmer of hope. Hi Madison, it read. I'm Amy from Willow Boutique downtown. A customer mentioned your sustainable line, and I checked out your website. I love your aesthetic and commitment to eco-friendly practices. Would you be interested in discussing the possibility of featuring some pieces in our shop? Nothing major to start, but we could see how they perform. It wasn't much, certainly not enough to solve my financial problems, but in that moment, it felt like the universe sending a tiny signal not to give up just yet. My meeting with Amy from Willow Boutique went surprisingly well. She was genuinely enthusiastic about my designs and the sustainable ethos behind sustainable threads. We agreed that she would take 10 pieces on consignment, meaning I wouldn't get paid unless they sold, but it was an opportunity for exposure in a well-established downtown store. I love that each piece comes with information about its environmental impact, Amy said as she examined the tags. Our customers are increasingly conscious about these things. I left the boutique with renewed optimism, but the hard reality of my situation quickly reasserted itself. The consignment arrangement meant no immediate income, and my financial situation had reached a critical point. My business account balance had dropped to $127.42, barely enough for the domain renewal fee, let alone new materials or manufacturing costs. That evening, I made the painful decision to list my sewing machine, a high-quality model I'd saved for months to buy, on an online marketplace. It sold within hours, along with my camera equipment and the vintage jewelry collection I'd inherited from my grandmother. The combined proceeds gave me just enough to fund one more small production run, which I hoped would sell through the boutique arrangement. When I returned to my studio apartment, an envelope had been slipped under my door, an eviction notice giving me 2 weeks to pay the overdue rent or vacate. I sat on the edge of my bed, the paper trembling in my hands, and for the first time seriously considered that my family might be right. Maybe this had all been a huge mistake. The stress began manifesting physically. I developed persistent insomnia, often lying awake until 4 a.m., before catching a few restless hours of sleep. I lost 12 pounds in 3 weeks, my clothes hanging loosely on my frame. Dark circles became a permanent feature under my eyes, and my hands developed a slight tremor when I was particularly anxious. My friend Rachel noticed the changes when we met for coffee, my first social outing in weeks. Madison, I'm worried about you, she said, genuine concern in her eyes. You don't look well. I'm just tired, I replied automatically. Things have been busy. Have you considered moving back in with your parents for a while? She suggested carefully. Just to regroup and save some money. The thought had crossed my mind, but pride had prevented me from seriously considering it. Now, facing eviction and complete financial ruin, I had to admit it might be my only option. That weekend, I swallowed my pride and asked my parents if I could move back home temporarily. Their response was a mixture of relief and vindication. Of course you can come home, my mother said, her tone softening for the first time in months. We've been so worried about you. Thank you, I managed, fighting back tears of humiliation. We can help you find a proper job, my father added. I have some contacts at several firms looking for marketing graduates. I nodded mutely, unable to admit that I was still unwilling to completely abandon my business dreams. Moving back into my childhood bedroom at 28 felt like the ultimate regression. I stored what remained of my inventory in the basement, arranged neatly on racks that seemed to mock me every time I walked past them. My father helped me move, his silence throughout the process more devastating than any "I told you so" could have been. That evening at dinner, the familiar family dynamic reasserted itself immediately, but with an added layer of patronizing concern. "We're just glad you've finally come to your senses," my mother said, serving me an extra portion as if to compensate for my weight loss. Sometimes we need to experience failure to appreciate the conventional path. My brother Tyler was less subtle. "How much debt did you rack up on this adventure?" he asked between bites. "Tyler," my mother cautioned. "What?" "It's a reasonable question. If she needs help with a repayment plan, I could give some advice." I stared at my plate, appetite gone. "I'll figure it out." The following days established a new, humiliating routine. My mother would leave job listings on my bed. My father would engage me in casual conversations about former colleagues' children who had found success in corporate careers. Even Tyler made a point of mentioning his company was hiring entry-level marketing coordinators. "The starting salary is decent, and there's room for advancement," he said one evening. "I could put in a word for you." The final blow came when I discovered my parents had been telling extended family members that I was recovering from exhaustion and a bit of a mental health situation. My aunt called to check on me, her voice dripping with the kind of concern reserved for unstable relatives. "It happens to creative types sometimes," she said sympathetically. "They get so caught up in these projects that they lose perspective. The important thing is that you're getting help now." I was mortified to realize my family had rewritten my business failure as a psychological episode. It was easier for them to believe I had suffered some kind of breakdown than to acknowledge I had simply taken a risk that hadn't paid off yet. My isolation deepened as I avoided social media, unable to face the contrast between my peers' successful careers and my own retreat to my parents' house. I spent most days half-heartedly applying to jobs I didn't want while checking in with Amy at Willow Boutique, hoping for news that my pieces were selling. The boutique had sold 3 items in 2 weeks, not terrible, but nowhere near enough to resurrect my business. Still, each sale gave me a flicker of validation that I clung to desperately. One afternoon, I was dropping off replacement inventory at the boutique when my phone rang. It was a client I had been courting before my financial collapse, the owner of a small ethical gift shop in a neighboring town. "Madison, I wanted to let you know that we won't be able to place an order after all," she said apologetically. "I heard you might be closing down." "What? Where did you hear that?" I asked, stunned. "Oh, I ran into your brother at a networking event. He mentioned you were taking some time off for health reasons and that the business was on indefinite hold." I ended the call as quickly as possible, rage building inside me. Tyler had actively sabotaged one of my few remaining business prospects. Whether out of misguided concern or malice, he had overstepped in a way I couldn't forgive. That night, I sat alone in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by remnants of my former life. The sustainable fashion line I had poured my heart, soul, and financial future into seemed to be dying a slow, painful death. My family had not only lost faith in me, but had decided my failure was so inevitable that they felt justified in accelerating it. Looking at the rack of carefully designed, ethically produced clothing in the corner of my room, I allowed myself to consider for the first time that perhaps this dream had run its course. Maybe it was time to admit defeat, find a conventional job, and relegate sustainable threads to the status of an expensive lesson learned. In that moment, I had never felt more alone or more defeated. 3 days after discovering my brother's interference with my business, I received an unexpected call from Amy at Willow Boutique. My heart sank, assuming she was calling to tell me the remaining consignment pieces weren't selling and I should pick them up. "Madison, the strangest thing happened yesterday," she began, her voice animated. "A woman came in specifically asking about your line. She bought 2 pieces and took a lot of notes." "Notes?" I asked, confused. "Yes." She asked detailed questions about your materials, your production process, everything. I gave her your business card, but I thought you should know she seemed really interested, more than a typical customer. I thanked Amy for the information, curious but not particularly hopeful. Strange customer behavior wasn't going to save my business. Later that afternoon, my phone rang with an unfamiliar local number. "Is this Madison Reynolds of Sustainable Threads?" a woman's voice asked when I answered. "Yes, speaking." "Hi Madison, this is Jasmine Wright from Channel 7 News. I visited Willow Boutique yesterday, and was impressed by your sustainable fashion line. I'm working on a feature about local eco-friendly businesses, and I'd love to include you. Would you be interested in an interview?" I nearly dropped the phone. "An interview? On the news?" "Yes, it would be part of our local innovation segment. We'd focus on your sustainable approach, and your journey as an entrepreneur. Nothing too intense, about 5 minutes on air." I agreed immediately, my mind racing with possibilities. While I had no illusions that one local news segment would magically solve all my problems, it represented something I'd been sorely lacking: validation and exposure. When I shared the news with my family at dinner, their reactions were predictably dismissive. "Local news," my father said with a raised eyebrow. "Those segments usually air at odd hours when no one's watching." My mother tried to sound supportive, but failed. "Well, that's nice, dear. Though I hope you're still focusing on those job applications. The marketing position at Tyler's firm closes on Friday," she added pointedly. My brother didn't even attempt encouragement. "Just don't get your hopes up. These things rarely lead to anything." Despite their dampening effect, I spent the next few days preparing meticulously for the interview. I couldn't afford new clothes, so I carefully steamed my best outfit from my own line, a structured blazer made from recycled polyester with handcrafted wooden buttons from sustainable forestry. I practiced potential questions and answers in the mirror, working to sound confident without appearing desperate. I researched industry statistics about the environmental impact of fast fashion to ensure I could speak knowledgeably. The morning of the interview, I woke with my stomach in knots. This felt like my last chance to salvage something from the wreckage of my business dreams. I borrowed my mother's car and drove to the small TV studio, rehearsing my talking points under my breath. The studio was smaller than I had imagined, bustling with activity as staff prepared for various segments. Jasmine Wright, the reporter who had contacted me, greeted me warmly. "Madison, thank you for coming in. We're excited to feature your work." She led me to a small area set up with 2 chairs and professional lighting. A rack nearby held several pieces from my collection that I had brought for the visual portion of the segment. "We'll keep it conversational," Jasmine explained as a makeup artist dusted powder across my face. "I'll ask about your background, what inspired you to start a sustainable fashion line, and the challenges you've faced. Just be yourself." Viewers respond to authenticity. As the cameras prepared to roll, I felt a moment of panic. What if I froze? What if this public exposure only served to make my failure more humiliating? But when Jasmine asked her first question, "What inspired you to create sustainable threads?" Something shifted within me. I began speaking about the environmental impact of fast fashion, the statistics about textile waste in landfills, and my vision for creating beautiful clothing that didn't harm the planet. Every piece we create is designed to last, both in terms of quality and style, I explained, my voice growing stronger with each word. The fashion industry is one of the world's largest polluters, but it doesn't have to be that way. As the interview progressed, Jasmine seemed genuinely impressed with my knowledge and passion. She asked thoughtful follow-up questions and gave me space to demonstrate some of the unique features of my designs. "These pieces are beautiful," she commented, examining the tailoring on one of my jackets. "You can really see the craftsmanship." When she asked about challenges, I hesitated briefly before deciding on honesty. "It hasn't been easy," I admitted. "Sustainable materials cost more, small batch production is expensive, and educating consumers about why these pieces cost more than fast fashion takes time. I've faced plenty of skepticism, even from those closest to me. But I believe in what I'm creating and the difference it can make." Before I knew it, the interview was wrapping up. Jasmine thanked me on camera and mentioned that Sustainable Thread's website would be shown in the segment for viewers who wanted to learn more. "That was excellent," she said once the cameras stopped rolling. "Your passion really came through." This segment will air next Wednesday evening at 6:30 p.m. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in months. Regardless of what came from the interview, for those 30 minutes in the studio, I had been treated as a legitimate business owner with something valuable to offer. It was a validation I hadn't realized how desperately I needed. When I told my family the air date, their reactions remained underwhelming. "That's during our neighborhood association meeting," my mother noted. "I'll have to record it." "I wouldn't expect much," my father cautioned. "These human interest stories rarely generate any real business. At least you'll have something nice for your portfolio when you apply for marketing jobs," my brother added, managing to turn even this opportunity into a reminder of what he perceived as my inevitable return to conventional employment. Despite their continued skepticism, I marked the date on my calendar and allowed myself to feel a small spark of hope. Even if nothing tangible came from the interview, it was a reminder that someone, a professional journalist, no less, had seen value in what I was creating. As the day of the broadcast approached, I vacillated between excitement and anxiety. Part of me feared the segment would be edited to make me look foolish or naive. Another part hoped it might generate just enough interest to keep Sustainable Threads alive a little longer. Either way, I was determined to watch it with my head held high. This interview represented something important. In the midst of failure and doubt, I had still shown up to advocate for my vision. Whatever happened next, that was something no one could take away from me. The evening of the broadcast, I sat stiffly on my parents' sofa, trying to ignore the tension in the room. My mother busied herself with needlepoint, glancing occasionally at the television. My father pretended to read the newspaper, but lowered it slightly when the local innovation segment began. Tyler had positioned himself at the dining table with his laptop, ostensibly working, but clearly within earshot. Our next story features a local entrepreneur bringing sustainability to the fashion industry, the anchor announced, and suddenly my face appeared on screen. Seeing myself was jarring. I looked more composed than I had felt during filming, though the strain of recent months was visible in my eyes despite the studio makeup. As the segment progressed, I was relieved to find that Jasmine had presented my business fairly and positively, highlighting the environmental benefits of sustainable fashion. Madison Reynolds represents a new generation of entrepreneurs who believe business success and environmental responsibility can go hand in hand, Jasmine's voiceover stated as the camera panned across my designs. The interview portion showed me explaining the production process and the importance of knowing where materials come from. The segment concluded with information about Willow Boutique carrying my line, and a brief display of my website address. When it ended, the silence in the living room was deafening. "Well, that was nice," my mother finally offered. "You spoke very clearly." "The lighting was unflattering," my father commented, returning to his newspaper. "These local productions never invest in proper equipment." Tyler didn't look up from his laptop. "At least they spelled your website correctly." Their underwhelmed reaction stung, but I had expected nothing less. I excused myself to my room, wanting to be alone with my thoughts. As I sat on my childhood bed, my phone chimed with a text from Amy at Willow Boutique. "Just saw the segment. You were amazing. So proud to carry your line." I smiled at her enthusiasm, appreciating the support, but assuming the interview would generate minimal real impact. Then my phone buzzed again. And again. And again. Notifications began pouring in: Instagram followers, website visitors, Facebook messages. I opened my laptop with trembling hands and logged into my business email account. 27 new messages had arrived in the past 15 minutes, most with the subject line, "Seen on Channel 7, or Sustainable Fashion Inquiry." When I opened my website analytics dashboard, I gasped. The real-time visitor count was higher than I'd ever seen, over 100 people actively browsing my site. As I watched in disbelief, the first order notification appeared. Then another. And another. My phone rang. It was Amy from Willow Boutique. "Madison, you need to bring more inventory immediately," she said, excitement evident in her voice. "I've had 6 people come in asking for your pieces in the last half hour. We've sold everything we had." I stammered a response, promising to bring more items in the morning. As soon as I hung up, another call came in, this time from a boutique across town that I had approached months ago without success. "We saw you on the news," the owner said. "Your approach to sustainability aligns with our shop's values. Could we set up a meeting to discuss carrying your line?" By midnight, my website had processed 27 orders, more than the previous month combined. My email inbox contained inquiries from 3 additional boutiques, a local fashion blogger, and an invitation to participate in an upcoming sustainable business fair. I sat in stunned silence, refreshing my screens every few minutes to confirm I wasn't imagining the sudden surge of interest. The validation was overwhelming after months of doubt and dismissal. The next morning, I entered the kitchen to find my family already at breakfast. I couldn't contain my excitement any longer. "The segment worked," I announced, clutching my phone. "I received over 40 orders overnight, and 3 new boutiques want to carry my line." My mother looked up, surprise evident on her face. 40 orders. From one news segment? "Yes," I replied, allowing myself a small, satisfied smile. "And the website traffic is still climbing." My father lowered his coffee mug. "Well, that's unexpected. Though sustaining that interest will be the real challenge." Tyler seemed the most shocked. "Let me see," he said, reaching for my phone. I showed him the order notifications and analytics dashboard. For once, he had nothing dismissive to say. The following days brought a whirlwind of activity. I scrambled to fulfill the sudden influx of orders, grateful that I had maintained a small inventory even in my darkest moments. Amy sold through a second batch of consignment pieces in 3 days, prompting her to propose a more formal ongoing arrangement. The local department store that had ignored my previous outreach emails now wanted to discuss featuring sustainable threads in their local designers section. A regional fashion influencer with over 50,000 followers purchased one of my jackets and posted about it, tagging my business and praising the quality and sustainable practices. My parents' attitudes underwent a subtle shift. My mother began asking genuine questions about the business. My father stopped leaving job listings on my bed. I suppose there might be a market for this sustainable approach after all, he conceded one evening, in what constituted a major admission for him. The most dramatic change came a week after the broadcast, when my phone rang with an unknown number. "Is this Madison Reynolds?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes, speaking. This is Eleanor Banks from Regional Business Quarterly. We're doing a feature on eco-entrepreneurship, and your name came up multiple times. We'd like to include sustainable threads in our cover story." I nearly dropped the phone. Regional Business Quarterly was a respected publication read by serious investors and business owners throughout the state. That evening, I worked through the night fulfilling orders. The sudden success was both exhilarating and overwhelming. My body was exhausted, but my mind buzzed with possibilities that had seemed impossible just days earlier. Around 3 a.m., I checked my business bank account and stared in disbelief at the balance, $12,873.42. More money than I'd seen in my account since launching the business. For the first time in months, I could pay my suppliers on time, invest in new inventory, and begin planning for growth rather than mere survival. As dawn broke, I leaned back in my chair, simultaneously exhausted and energized. The local news segment had done more than generate sales. It had validated my vision and proven that a market existed for what I was creating. After months of being told my business was a fantasy, I finally had concrete evidence to the contrary. The path forward would still be challenging, but something fundamental had shifted. I was no longer just pretending to be successful. I was experiencing the first true taste of it. 1 month after the Channel 7 interview aired, I signed the lease on a small commercial space downtown. It wasn't fancy, just 600 square feet in a converted warehouse building, but it represented a monumental step forward. No more working from my childhood bedroom. No more storing inventory in my parents' basement. Sustainable Threads had a real home. The day I moved in, Amy from Willow Boutique brought coffee and helped me arrange my desk. "I knew you had something special from the first time I saw your pieces," she said, hanging a corkboard on the exposed brick wall. "Though I'll admit, even I didn't expect things to take off quite this fast." The business had maintained its momentum after the initial surge. While orders had naturally slowed from the frenetic post-interview peak, they had stabilized at a level that was not just sustainable but profitable. The wholesale arrangements with local boutiques provided a reliable income base, while the direct-to-consumer sales through my website offered better margins. My next major milestone came in the form of Zoe Parker, a recent fashion design graduate, who approached me after reading the Regional Business Quarterly feature. "I love what you're doing with sustainable materials," she told me during our meeting. "Most fashion jobs are with fast fashion brands, and that's not the direction I want to take my career." Hiring my first employee was terrifying and exhilarating. The responsibility of someone else's paycheck added pressure, but having help with production and order fulfillment was transformative. Zoe brought fresh creative energy and technical skills that complemented my own, allowing me to focus more on business development and design. The Regional Business Quarterly piece led to a second news feature, this time focusing specifically on Sustainable Threads' growth story. From near bankruptcy to thriving local business in just months, the headline read. The reporter interviewed not only me, but also several customers and retailers carrying my line, creating a comprehensive picture of a business on the rise. The most surreal change was in my family's attitude. My father, who had once told me to stop pretending to be successful, now mentioned my business to his clients. My mother began wearing one of my designs to her book club meetings, proudly telling her friends that her daughter had made it. Even Tyler's tone had shifted dramatically. "Have you considered approaching venture capital?" he asked during a family dinner, the same event that had once been an exercise in humiliation. With your growth metrics, you could make a compelling case for funding. I smiled politely, but made no commitments. The memory of their dismissal was still fresh, and I had developed a healthy skepticism about their sudden enthusiasm. Their support felt conditional on my success rather than my passion or vision. This suspicion was confirmed when my father started bringing up sustainable threads at every opportunity, particularly in social settings, where he could position himself as the supportive parent who had always believed in his daughter's entrepreneurial spirit. Madison has always had this creative drive, he told his golf partners during a dinner I was invited to. We encouraged her to pursue her passion, even when it meant taking risks. I nearly choked on my water, remembering his actual words, "Stop pretending to be successful. You're not. You're failing." My mother's revisionist history was equally striking. We always told Madison that with her talent and determination, she would make it work, she told her sister on the phone, within my hearing. It was just a matter of time. The most unexpected development came when Kevin, my ex-boyfriend, suddenly reappeared in my life. He messaged me on Instagram, commenting on a feature about sustainable threads in a local lifestyle magazine. "So proud of what you've accomplished," his message read. "I always knew you had it in you. Would love to catch up sometime." I stared at the message for a long time, remembering how he had walked away when things got difficult, citing my obsession with the business as his reason. Now that same business was apparently a reason to reconnect. After careful consideration, I composed a polite, but distant reply, "Thank you for the kind words. The business is keeping me very busy these days. Wishing you all the best." Setting boundaries with Kevin felt empowering, as did my careful navigation of my family's revised narrative. I appreciated their current support, but refused to pretend the past hadn't happened. The painful months of doubt and dismissal had taught me valuable lessons about who I could truly count on, and who only showed up for the success story, not the struggle. My new studio space quickly became more than just a workplace. I hosted small events for customers, teaching them about sustainable fashion practices and the environmental impact of their clothing choices. These gatherings built community around the brand and reinforced the mission behind sustainable threads. The financial stability brought peace of mind I hadn't experienced since launching the business. I paid off my credit card debt, began rebuilding my savings, and even started contributing to a retirement account again, a small gesture that would have made my old financial advisor father proud, though I kept that detail to myself. Sustainable threads was still small by industry standards, but it was undeniably successful. We had a loyal customer base, a growing wholesale presence in boutiques across the state, and a clear mission that resonated with increasingly conscious consumers. Standing in my studio one evening, watching the sunset through the large industrial windows, I felt a profound sense of vindication. Not just because I had proven my doubters wrong, but because I had stayed true to my vision despite overwhelming pressure to abandon it. The business was succeeding on my terms, creating beautiful, ethical fashion that didn't compromise my values or harm the planet. That was a victory far more meaningful than simply proving my family wrong. As I locked up the studio that night, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. From the excitement of those first designs to the crushing doubt of near failure, and now to this moment of hard-earned success. Each stage had shaped not just my business, but my understanding of myself and what truly mattered. The road ahead would undoubtedly bring new challenges, but I now faced them with confidence born from weathering the worst storms. I had built something real and meaningful, something that was making a difference, however small, in an industry desperately in need of change. And perhaps most importantly, I had learned to believe in myself even when no one else did. 1 year after the Channel 7 interview that changed everything, I stood in the newly expanded Sustainable Thread studio, watching as a photographer from Ethical Style magazine captured images for their Innovators in Fashion issue. The feature would highlight my journey and Sustainable Thread's commitment to environmental responsibility in an industry notorious for waste and exploitation. "Can you tell us about your design philosophy?" the journalist asked, recorder in hand. "Every piece we create considers its entire life cycle," I explained. "From the sourcing of materials to production methods, and ultimately, what happens when the garment is no longer wanted. We design for durability and timelessness rather than fleeting trends." The past year had brought remarkable growth. Sustainable Threads now employed 5 people, including Zoe, who had been promoted to production manager. Our pieces were carried in 27 boutiques across 3 states, and our online business had customers from all 50 states and 12 countries. But the numbers, while validating, weren't what filled me with the deepest sense of accomplishment. It was the impact we were making, educating consumers about sustainable choices, proving that ethical fashion could be both beautiful and commercially viable, and slowly changing industry practices through example. As the magazine team wrapped up their session, I checked my phone and saw a message from Lucas Bennett, asking if we were still on for dinner. A warm feeling spread through my chest at the thought of seeing him later. Lucas had entered my life 6 months after the news interview, when we met at a sustainable business conference where I was speaking. Unlike Kevin, who had supported my dream until it became inconvenient, Lucas had entered my life when Sustainable Threads was already successful. He admired what I had built, but was equally interested in the journey that had shaped me. "I'm more impressed by how you handled near failure than how you're handling success," he told me on our 3rd date. "That reveals character." His perspective was refreshing after months of dealing with people who only wanted to associate with the successful version of my story, conveniently forgetting or rewriting the struggle that preceded it. My relationship with my family had evolved into something complex and nuanced. We had never directly addressed their early dismissal of my business, or their revisionist history about always supporting my entrepreneurial journey. Instead, we had established a new normal, one where they took pride in my success, but had limited involvement in my business decisions. The most significant conversation had happened 3 months ago, when I declined my father's offer to help manage my growing business finances. "I appreciate the offer, Dad," I had said carefully, "but I've developed my own approach to the financial side of the business. It's working well for me. I have 40 years of financial experience, Madison," he had replied, looking slightly offended. "I could help you avoid common mistakes." "I know you could," I acknowledged. "But this is something I need to do my way, even if that means making my own mistakes." He had fallen silent then, and I wondered if he was remembering his harsh words from a year ago. When he finally spoke, his tone was different, more thoughtful than I had ever heard from him. "I was wrong about your business," he admitted quietly. "I didn't see what you saw. I was looking at traditional metrics and conventional wisdom, and you were creating something new." The acknowledgement, while limited, felt monumental coming from a man who rarely admitted being wrong about anything. I had thanked him for his honesty, and we had moved forward with a more authentic, if still somewhat distant, relationship. My mother had found her own way to make peace with my unconventional path. She now proudly wore Sustainable Threads pieces to social events, though she still occasionally mentioned backup career options when she was feeling particularly anxious. Tyler remained Tyler, competitive and self-focused, but even he had developed a grudging respect for what I had built, especially after Sustainable Threads was featured in a business school case study at his alma mater. Looking around the studio as the magazine team departed, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey, even its most painful moments. The doubts, the setbacks, the near failure had all contributed to building not just a successful business, but a stronger sense of self. I had learned that true support wasn't about people believing in you when success was already evident. It was about those rare individuals who saw your vision when it was still just that, a vision. Amy from Willow Boutique, who had taken a chance on an unknown designer with no track record. Jasmine Wright, who had found value in my story when most saw only failure. Zoe, who had joined when the business was still precarious, because she believed in its mission. I had also learned about setting boundaries, with family members whose support was conditional, with an ex-partner who only wanted back in once the hard part was over, and with my own tendency toward people-pleasing that had made rejection so devastating. Most importantly, I had learned that external validation, while sweet, wasn't the true measure of success. The moments that mattered most weren't the magazine features or the impressive sales figures, but the quiet victories, the customer emails about how our pieces made them feel both stylish and aligned with their values, the clothing manufacturers who contacted us to learn about our sustainable practices, the fashion students who cited sustainable threads as inspiration for their own ethical design ambitions. That evening over dinner with Lucas, I shared the latest development, an opportunity to partner with a major department store on an exclusive sustainable collection. "That's incredible," he said, genuine excitement in his eyes. "How are you feeling about it?" "Excited, but cautious," I admitted. "I want to make sure they're truly committed to our ethical standards, not just using us for greenwashing." He nodded thoughtfully. "You've built something with real integrity. It makes sense to protect that." Later, as we walked along the riverfront, I reflected on the unexpected path that had led me here. How close I had come to giving up. How different my life would be if I had listened to those who told me to stop pretending to be successful. "What are you thinking about?" Lucas asked, noticing my thoughtful expression. "Just that sometimes the people who doubt you the loudest are giving you the opportunity to prove them wrong the most dramatically," I replied. He smiled. "And sometimes their doubt is the best fuel for proving something to yourself." He was right. While vindication felt sweet, the most meaningful victory wasn't proving others wrong, it was proving myself right. Proving that my vision had value. That sustainable fashion could be both ethical and successful. That listening to my own voice over the chorus of doubters had been the right choice. The journey of sustainable threads continued to unfold, with new challenges and opportunities emerging daily. But I faced them now with a confidence forged in the fire of near failure and tempered by the perspective that only comes from standing on both sides of the success divide. I had learned that success isn't a single moment of triumph, but a continuous process of staying true to your values while adapting to new realities. It isn't about proving others wrong, but about creating something that proves your own vision right. And perhaps most importantly, I had learned that sometimes the biggest leaps forward come right after the moments when giving up seems most reasonable. That perseverance isn't about never doubting, but about continuing despite those doubts. So if you're watching this and facing your own chorus of doubters, remember that their skepticism may be the backdrop against which your success shines most brightly. Keep believing, keep building, and know that sometimes it takes just one person, even if that person is only yourself, believing in your vision to eventually make it real. If my story has resonated with you in any way, I'd love to hear about your own experiences with doubt and perseverance in the comments below. Has there been a time when others' disbelief fueled your determination? What helped you stay the course when giving up seemed easiest? Hit that like button if you've ever proved someone wrong who said you couldn't do something. Subscribe for more stories about entrepreneurship and resilience, and share this video with someone who might need a reminder that success often waits just beyond our darkest moments. Thank you for being part of this journey with me, and remember, the only validation that truly matters is the kind you give yourself.